Hello. So in this very special Halloween episode, final episode of my Halloween 2020 series, we're going to be talking about the greatest Halloween movie of all time, Kenny Ortega's 1993 film, Hocus Pocus. Don't even bother disagreeing with me in the comments. It is the greatest Halloween movie. Full stop. So, Hocus Pocus, like many Disney films, and I would venture to say most children's or young adult films, is basically a coming-of-age story in the fish-out-of-water genre. It's about finding your place, finding out who you are, and sort of working through the transition from childhood and irresponsibility to adulthood and responsibility. With witches, with delightful humor, with fantastic performances thrown in for good measure. Incidentally, I'm wearing one of my Hocus Pocus t-shirts. So the story of Hocus Pocus is that in colonial Salem, Massachusetts, there are the Sanderson sisters, Winifred, Sarah, and Mary, three witches. They attempt to remain young and beautiful forever by stealing the life force of children. And when the movie opens, we see them stealing the life force of Emily Binks. Her brother, Thackeray Binks, attempts to stop them and fails and gets turned into an immortal talking cat. So that's always fun, because you gotta love immortal talking cats. Then we cut to the present, which, for the purposes of the film, is 1993. So no longer the present in which I'm making this video for YouTube, but you know what I mean. So, it's 1993. Max Dennison has moved with his family, including his younger sister Danny Dennison, to Salem, Massachusetts from the very hip and swinging Los Angeles. He doesn't fit into Salem. He's not particularly interested in Halloween. This is around Halloween, by the way. That's not just like Salem does have a thriving witch industry, as I understand it, but they're not just like, oh, every day is Halloween. We have nothing else going on in Salem except witches. No, that's probably not the case. But this movie is set in the run-up to Halloween, in which their high school history teacher is doing a lesson on these three witches who were hanged in colonial Salem. So that's our sort of introduction to Max as like, oh, I'm from Los Angeles and I'm cool and I don't care about witches and I'm not sold on local folklore and all this stuff. But he is very interested in Allison, who's one of the girls in the class. And so that becomes important because she becomes his sort of partner in crime as the movie goes on. Because Max is sort of put in charge of taking his little sister Danny trick-or-treating, and they end up at Allison's house. And she's like, hey, my mom used to run the museum about the Sanderson sisters before it closed. And so Max is like, let's go break in, which they do, which of course sounds like a fantastic plan. And once they've broken in, there is the Black Flame Candle, which basically, according to legend, when a virgin lights it on Halloween, it will bring the Sanderson sisters back from the dead. Max, the sophisticated, cosmopolitan urbanite who doesn't believe in local folklore, lights the candle. The Sanderson sisters are brought back, And basically, most of the movie is them creating mayhem in the modern world. Um, so they go around and they don't know modern stuff. Like, they are confused by pavement and things like this, and these really hilarious fish out of water type scenes. So that's our second dimension of that sort of fish out of water element. We've got Max Dennison transplanted from LA to Salem, and then we've got the Sanderson sisters transplanted from colonial New England to contemporary New England. So they go around and they put spells on people. They do kidnap a few children, but they're not super successful at it. Mostly they're chasing Max, Danny, and Allison, who have joined forces with, or sort of been co-opted by, Thackeray Binks, the cat, who's still around, still talking, still guarding the candle unsuccessfully in this instance. So they join forces. They steal Winifred's spellbook, which is a significant plot point because that contains her spells that she needs in order to brew the potion to steal the life force of children. So they're trying to get that back. The witches are trying to get that back, and they're going around and, they're crashing Halloween parties, and they're being confused about the fact that kids are wearing costumes and they don't know how buses work and all this stuff. What ends up happening ultimately is a sort of series of failed attempts to defeat the witches. The first being that in the high school, the kids lock the witches in a kiln, which apparently, I don't know, they have for pottery or something. My high school didn't have a kiln, but they have a kiln for whatever reason. And so they lock the witches in there and they attempt to burn them to death. Which is that's a scene that actually really struck me this time, because it's a very sort of callous, they're witches, sure, they're bad, they're trying to steal the life force of children, I get all of that, but you've trapped them in a kiln, and you're now watching through this little porthole thing as they literally burn to death, and you're just these three kids are just standing there yeah, I'm not bothered by this at all. It's kind of fucked up if you actually think about it. But anyway, so that fails. The witches dissolve into smoke, go up out of the chimney, and then they come back later, and they're sort of reconstituted. Their unholy power, or whatever it is, reconstitutes them. So, they now have the advantage, because the kids think they're dead, and so they go to Max's house, where all of the kids and Thackeray Binks are just sleeping, whatever. The witches steal the spellbook, capture Danny, and take her back to their cottage to brew the potion to attempt to steal her life force. They do this, but and they sort of hypnotize and lure all of the town kids of Salem to come to them. But Max and Allison get there first, and they basically destroy most of the potion. The Sanderson sisters are only able to save enough for one child, and Winifred sets her sights on Danny, basically to punish Max for having interfered with their plan. So they end up basically tracking the kids to a graveyard where the witches can't land because it's hollowed ground, etc., etc. And this is where the final battle commences. Basically, a struggle over who can take possession of Danny. And at one point, Max, who earlier in the film had been extremely reluctant to sort of have anything to do with Danny. He didn't want her in his room, he didn't want to take her trick-or-treating, etc., etc. He gets a hold of this potion to drain her life force, And rather than allowing Winifred to use it on his sister, he drinks it himself, thereby sacrificing himself for her. Fortunately, they've managed to stall long enough that the sun comes up, and with the black flame candle deal, the witches only get the one Halloween night, and then they turn back into dust forever. Unless they can steal the souls of children, or the life force of children, or whatever it is. So, here we have the culmination of the coming of age story, and then we have this kind of cheesy bit where Danny and Max are both sort of laying on the ground in the cemetery, and she's like, "You sacrificed your life for me. Oh, I love you." And he's like, "I love you too. You're my little sister." It's like, yeah, it's fine, whatever. It's a kid's movie. It's good. It's great. I mean, could be better written, more compelling. That's all I'm saying. Doesn't change the fact that it's the best Halloween movie ever made. And then Binks, Thackeray Binks, who had lived for 300 some years, dies. He actually dies now that the witches are dead, and his soul is released to go join his dead sister's soul in the afterlife. So we get these sort of reconciliations, but the key thing here is again that coming of age element, particularly for Max, this transition from the sort of surly teenager who's too cool for things and he doesn't believe in local folklore, and LA is so much better, I don't like Salem, I'm gonna wear a tie-dye t-shirt. Oh, that's a big deal for him. To, I now recognize my responsibilities, I recognize that other people, other communities have a legitimate corner on a truth, and I recognize my responsibility to those around me, particularly my sister, to the point where I'm willing to sacrifice my life to protect her. So again, that's the sort of coming of age element here, this transition from self-centered irresponsibility to selfless concern for others. And again, we get that fish out of water element on a couple of different levels here, and that's both the source of a lot of the film's anxiety about Max's coming of age tale, but it's also the source of a lot of comedy with the Sanderson sisters, because they're also fish out of water, but they don't grow, they don't develop. They are the same characters at the end of the film that they were at the beginning, 300 years earlier. So that's actually, I think, a really significant ideological point about this film, is that the character who grows, the character who transitions through via this fish out of water experience, this experience of being uncomfortable, of feeling like you don't belong, the character who moves through that is the hero and the one who wins at the end of the film. Whereas the characters who don't grow, who don't progress, who don't change, these are the characters who lose at the end of the film. They're the villains, and they ultimately don't succeed. So again, it is a children's movie, young adult movie, whatever it is, and that's significant in terms of the ideological point that the film is making.